Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Christopher McCurtis Bowen, on an edition of Fire of Liberty. Today is the 17th of May, 2017. As we continue to change, co-create Renaissance on Earth, paradise, and entering this epic golden age of wealth, prosperity, peace, and lots of order and paradise. And ultimately cementing the ability to create this galactic society, which is in development underway, as well as the cohabitation of many different types of species living together peacefully, extraterrestrials to extraordinary beings to all sorts of beings that can live together peacefully, as I mentioned in the previous edition. So now, starting off with the Chiranjiva Bharadwaja, we're going to continue off where I left off yesterday. Now we should discuss the Jain religion only. 1. The Jainis believe in two principal entities only, one possessed of consciousness and the other devoid of consciousness. Viveka consists in distinguishing one from the other. Viveki is one who accepts what is worthy of being accepted and rejects what is worthy of being rejected. End quote. 2. Quote, it is best to reject that senseless religion which teaches that there is a maker of the universe free from passions and desires who created the world, and to embrace the Jain, close parentheses, the Jain religion which teaches that. The soul is possessed of the highest light and can be realized through practice of yoga. End quote. They do not believe in any other conscious entity, God, besides the soul. The Buddhists and the Jainis hold that there is no eternal, perfect God. Raja Shiva Prasad writes in his book called the Ithihas Timaranasha that they have got two names, Jain and Buddha, which is Buddhist. These two terms are synonymous, but some of the Buddhists are Vama Margis, and eat meat and drink spiritual liquors. The Jainis differ from them. Mahavira and Gautama Gandharas, Lord of Hosts, are called Buddhas by the Buddhists and have been named Gandhara and Janavara by the Jainis. Raja Shiva Prasad, whose forefathers have been Jainis for generations, together writes in the 3rd chapter of his book called Ityas Timarnashak that Jina lived altogether about 1,000 years before Swami Shankaracharya. The Buddhist or Jain religion prevailed in the whole Bharatavarsha. He then adds the following footnote, quote, by the term Buddha, we mean that anti-Vedic religion which prevails in all India from the time of Gandhar Makavir or Gautama Swami to that of Swami Shankar, and was believed in by the emperors of Ashoka and Samprati. The Jain religion cannot but be included in it. The words Jina, from which the word Jain is derived, and Buddha, from which the word Buddha, Buddhist, is derived, are both synonymous. The dictionary gives the same meaning of both these words, and both Jainis and Buddhists believe in Gautama. Besides Shakyamuni, Gautama Buddha is often called Mahavira. In the ancient books such as Dipavansha of the Buddhists, it is clear then that in his time at any rate both these religions were one and the same. The foreigners, Europeans, have in their books called them by the name of Buddhists. It is only for this reason that we have not used the term Jainis for the followers of Gautama and have instead called them Buddhists. The Amar Kosha says the same thing. He is called Sarvajna Sagata Buddha, Dharmaraja, Tathagata, Samantabhadra, Mirajit, Lokojit, and Jina, etc. It is not clear even now that Buddha and Jina or Buddhist or Jaini are one and the same? Has even Amar Singh made a mistake in writing that Buddha and Jina are the names of the same person? The ignorant Jainis neither know anything about their own religion nor that of others. Being blinded by prejudice, they simply talk nonsense. But those who are learned among them know very well that the word Buddha is synonymous with Jina and Buddha and Buddhist with Jaini. There is not the least doubt about it. The Jainis hold that their soul itself becomes God. Their Tirthankars, having attained salvation, become God. They do not believe in an eternal God. Sarvajna, omniscient. Vitaraga, free from passions of love. Arhan, worthy of homage. Kivali, saved. Tirthankrit, sanctified. And Jina, victorious, are the 6 names of gods of the atheists, Jains and Buddhists. Chandrasuri thus describes the nature of the Supreme Deity in his book called the Aptanishcharyalankara. Capital O. Verily, he that is free from such evils as passions of love, worthy of being worshipped in the 3 worlds, rightly expounds all branches of knowledge, is omniscient and adorable, and is the supreme God. Trantatitas have written to the same effect, to quote, "There is no omniscient, eternal God demonstrable by ocular evidence, since we do not see one at the present time. In the absence of ocular proof, there can be no inferential evidence, because the inferential proof of an object can only be available after direct perception of a part of it," quote, 3, or unquote, and then 3, quote, "In the presence of direct perception, an inference, testimony, or verbal authority also cannot be available in order to prove the existence of an eternal, immortal, omniscient, supreme spirit. These 3 being unavailable, Avarthavada, praise and dispraise, Prakriti, or life sketch, and Itihasa, history, can be of no good," end quote. Quote, "Like Bahubrihi, compound, the existence of the invisible supreme cannot be demonstrated without hearing about God from preachers. The reiteration of his nature attributes is impossible," end quote. Capital A. Had there been no eternal God, who would have created the bodies of the parents of your God, Arhan? Question mark. A body possesses all of the necessary organs in the proper proportions and places, etc., and fit to perfectly discharge all its functions. Verily needs a maker, one who combines all the different elements properly to come into being, because, being inert, such a beautifully constructed body cannot by itself come into existence, as its constituent elements do not possess the knowledge of combining together properly. Besides, one that is first possessed of such faults as the passions of love, etc., and then later on becomes free from them, cannot be God, because when the causes whose operation helps the soul to free itself from the bondage of evils, such as passions of love, cease to act, their effect, the salvation, will come to an end. One that is possessed of finite power and finite knowledge can never be omnipresent and omniscient, since the soul is by nature circumscribed and possessed of a finite nature and finite attributes and activity. It can never expound perfectly all the different branches of knowledge. Hence your Tirthankaras can never become God. 2. Do you believe in what is perceptible to the senses and not in what is otherwise? Question mark. Just as color cannot be perceived by ears nor sound by eyes, in like manner, the Eternal Supreme spirit is not perceptible to the senses. He can only be seen by a pure soul through the purity of heart, acquisition of knowledge, and the practice of yoga. Just as one cannot reap the advantages of knowledge without acquiring it, likewise the Supreme Spirit cannot be seen without the practice of yoga and gaining the highest knowledge. Moreover, just as the earth is made directly cognizable by observing its properties such as form, etc., which are inseparably related to it, similarly we become directly cognizant of God by observing the wonderful design of this world. Again, when we are inclined to commit a sin, feelings of fear, shame, and hesitation arise in our soul. Now these feelings are given rise to by the omniscient Supreme Spirit. We thus become directly cognizant of the presence of God. 3. The evidence of direct cognition as well as that of inference being thus available, the evidence of testimony in support of the eternal beinglessness, omniscient God is also valid. All these proofs being available, it cannot but be right to praise his powers and attributes, because the nature, attributes, and characteristics of an eternal substance are also eternal. Hence there is nothing to prevent us from glorifying the eternal Supreme Spirit. For just as no human work can be done without the doer, likewise this great masterpiece, the universe, cannot possibly have come into existence without a maker. Such being the case, even an idiot cannot doubt his existence. On hearing about God from preachers, it also becomes easy to reiterate what one has heard. Hence it is wrong on the part of the Jainis to deny the existence of God on the ground that such proofs as direct cognition, etc., are wanting. Capital O. 1. Quote, it cannot be said of an eternal Shastra that it is created, because how could a non-eternal and therefore unreliable book correctly explain an omniscient God? Question mark. To quote, if the existence of God is proved on the authority of his word, it comes to this, that the truth of an eternal revelation rests on the authority of an eternal God, while the existence of an eternal God is proved on the authority of his eternal word. This is an argument in a circle. End quote. 3. Quote, when you hold the Veda to be true because it is the word of an omniscient God, how can you then prove the existence of God on the authority of that very Veda? Question mark. In order to prove that God exists and the Veda, his word, you will have to look for some other authority, hence there will be no finality in authority. Capital A. We, open parentheses, believers in the Veda, close parentheses, hold that God, his nature, attributes, and actions are eternal. Eternal and beginningless substances cannot be subject to Anyanyashuraya dosha, the charge of being dependent on each other for authority. Just as an effect is known by its cause, and vice versa, the nature and the properties of a cause reside permanently in its effect, while those of an effect in its cause. In like manner, God and his infinite attributes, such as knowledge, being eternal, the Veda, which is God's word, cannot be charged with anvashta dosha, the absence of finality and authority, close parentheses. You believe your Tirthankaras to be God. Now this can never be true unless you believe your Tirthankaras to be God. Now this can never be true, because unless they had parents, their bodies could not be formed. How could they have then practiced austerities and attained knowledge and salvation? Question mark. What is the result of combination must have a beginning, since combination presupposes separate existence of the constituent elements. Hence you should believe in an eternal creator of the world. However great Siddha a man may be, he can never perfectly understand the construction of the human body. Besides, when a Siddha passes into the condition of dreamless sleep, he does not remain conscious of anything. Again, when a man is afflicted with physical or mental suffering, his knowledge also diminishes. No one but Jainis with warped intellects could believe an entity which is possessed of finite power and is circumscribed as God. If you say that those Tirthankaras were born of their parents, whose children were their parents, and so on, there will thus be an absence of finality. A discussion on theism and atheism. Now we give here questions set forth in part 2 of the Prakarna Ratnakar on theism and atheism with our answers. Capital O. Oh, by the way, side note, a Siddha is one who has attained the highest state of perfection possible to man. Capital O. Nothing happens in this world as the result. Actually, one more second. I also want to explain one quick thing. That was Siddha. The other one, another side note is, well, just another side note. Yeah, this is actually a completely separate side note. These have been approved of and published by many a well-known Jaini. Alright, continuing on. Capital O. Nothing happens in this world as the result of the will of God. Whatever happens is the result of deeds. Capital A. If everything is the result of deeds, who is the doer of deeds? ? If you answer that the soul is the doer of deeds, we ask who created the organs such as ears with which the soul does deeds? ? If you answer that they are beginningless and it is in their nature to come into being, we rejoin that what is beginningless can never cease to exist. Hence salvation will be impossible. If you say that like prag abhavat, that kind of non-existence which did not exist before it came into being, that's the definition. It has no beginning but has an end. All will be freed of the necessity of doing deeds without any effort on their part. If there were no God, the giver of the fruits of their deeds to souls, no soul will ever, of its own free will, suffer punishments for its sins. Just as burglars and other criminals do not voluntarily suffer punishment for their crimes such as burglary, it is the law that compels them to do so. In like manner, it is God who makes the soul reap the fruits of its actions, good or bad, otherwise all order will be lost. In other words, one soul will do deeds, while the other will reap the fruits thereof. Capital O. God is actionless because if he did any deeds, he would have to reap the fruits thereof. Hence you should also believe like us in the perfect beings who have attained salvation and are actionless. Capital A. God is not actionless. On the other hand, he is active. Why is he not active when he is a conscious being? When he is active, he cannot be actionless. No enlightened man can believe in your fictitious God who is no other than your Tirthankaras, human souls who have attained the state of salvation. Since whoever becomes God through the operation of certain causes would become non-eternal and dependent. Such a God was a mere human soul before he attained Godhead, and then, through some cause or another, he became God. Someday he will again become a soul, as it can never get rid of its own nature. It has been a soul for an infinite number of years and will remain so eternally. Hence it is right to believe in the eternal self-existent God. Now mark, exclamation point. The soul at the present time does acts virtuous or sinful and reaps the fruits thereof, pleasure or pain. But God does not. Had God not been active, he would not have been able to create the world. If you believe acts to be beginningless but perishable like pragabhavat, they will not stand in intimate, inseparable relation to the soul. And if this be the case, they will be sanyogaja, the result of union, and hence perishable. If you believe that the souls in the state of emancipation are actionless, parentheses, we should like to know, close parentheses, if they are possessed of consciousness or not. If you answer in the affirmative, then it is clear that they do possess mental activity, but if you deny them consciousness, parentheses, we ask, close parentheses, do they then become dead, inert, like stones in the state of emancipation, lie in one place and remain idle? Question mark. If you say yes, your salvation is no salvation at all, but darkness and bondage. Capital O. God is not all-pervading, because if he be so, all objects could be possessed of consciousness, and men should not be divided into 4 classes. Brahma, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, some of which are higher than others. The same God pervading all, there should be no inequality among human beings. Capital A. The pervader and the pervaded are not one and the same. On the other hand, one that is pervaded is localized, whilst the pervader is present in all places, just as ether pervades all, while the earth and other objects such as a pot and a piece of cloth are localized. But the ether and the earth are not one. In like manner, God and the universe are not one. Just as ether pervades all objects such as a pot or a piece of cloth, and yet they are not either. Likewise, God, who is possessed of consciousness, pervades all objects, but they do not become conscious like God. Just as a learned man and an ignorant man, a righteous man and an unrighteous man are not equal, in like manner, on account of differences in their qualities, such as knowledge and in action, such as truthfulness in speech, and a disposition such as gentleness. Open parentheses, Brahmas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, and outcasts are regarded unequal. Close parentheses. The duties and qualifications of the 4 classes have already been dealt with in Chapter 4, and I'm very certain that I've already gone over that in one of my editions and I mentioned. Capital O. If God be the author of creation, what is then the use of parents? Question mark. Capital A. Males and females created by God in the beginning of creation were not the result of sexual congress. This is called Aishwari Shrishti. But he is not the author of Javi Shrishti, creation, i.e., creation which is the result of sexual union. God cannot do what is the work of the soul. God has created trees, fruits, medicinal herbs, and cereals, etc. Side note for i.e. is not inherent in or inseparably related to the soul, but united to it. In other words, they are a sort of accretion. Okay, continuing on. God cannot do what is the work of the soul. God has created trees, fruits, medicinal herbs, and cereals, etc. If man would not take cereals, etc., thrash and grind them and make them into bread and eat it, will God do these things in his place? Question mark. The soul could not even exist if it did not do its work. Hence it rests with God to create, open parentheses, human, close parentheses, bodies in the beginning of creation, open parentheses, but after he has done so, close parentheses, it becomes the work of man to procreate children, etc. Capital O. Why did God get himself involved in the troubles and worries of this world when he is eternal, beginningless, conscious, all blissful, and all knowledge? Even an ordinary man would not give up his pleasures and take to what entails pain and suffering. Why should God have done such a thing? Question mark. Capital A. The Supreme Spirit is never involved in troubles and worries of this world, nor does he ever give up his blissful state, since he that is circumscribed is involved in pain and ignorance, but not one who is all-pervading. Who but the eternal, conscious, all-blissful, and omniscient Supreme Spirit could create the world? The soul does not possess the power of creating the world, nor does inert matter possess the power to mold itself. Hence it is the Supreme Spirit alone who creates the world and also remains in blissful state. Just as God has created this world out of the material atoms, likewise it is He who has ordained that children should be born of their parents, their efficient cause. Capital O. Why did God give up the bliss of emancipation and bother himself with the creation, sustenance, and dissolution of the universe? Capital A. God is ever free and eternal. He does not act like your Tirthankars who live in one place and were in bondage before they were emancipated. He that possesses an infinite nature, infinite powers, infinite attributes, infinite activity does not become subject to bondage by creating, sustaining, and dissolving this little, compared to God, world. Bondage and emancipation are correlated. Bondage has reference to emancipation and vice versa. How could emancipation be predicated of him who was never in bondage? It is the circumscribed soul that becomes subject to bondage and emancipation. The infinite, all-pervading, omnipresent God does not become subject to bondage or emancipation dependent upon particular causes. That Supreme Spirit is therefore called ever free. Capital O. The soul can reap the fruits of its deeds without the instrumentality of a higher power, even as intoxicants such as Indian hemp inebriate a man without any extrinsic aid. Hence, God is not the giver of fruits. Open parentheses of deeds, close parentheses. Capital A. Just as a dacoit or a burglar does not voluntarily go to jail, nor does a homicide of his free will mount the gallows, it is the king by whom those sentences are executed. Likewise, God justly punishes the soul for its sins in accordance with the laws ordained by him, because no soul wants to suffer punishment for its evil deeds. Hence, the necessity of a just ruler of the universe is established. Capital O. There is not one God in the universe. All emancipated souls become God. Capital A. This assertion is altogether absurd, because the soul, being emancipated after having been in bondage, must necessarily become subject to bondage again, because it is not free by nature. Your 24 Tirthankars were in bondage before they were emancipated, hence they will necessarily become subject to bondage again. If there are many gods, don't they quarrel and wrangle with each other, just as men do here? Capital O. Oh, idiot! ! There is no maker of this world. The universe has come into existence by itself. Capital A. This is a great blunder of Jainis. Can an act ever be done without a doer? Can an act ever come into being without any effort on part of the doer? Has anyone ever seen wheat being grown into flour and flour being made into bread without the agency of man, and the bread going without any effort on their part down the throats of the Jainis? Cotton is never seen to be transformed except through the instrumentality of man into thread and clothes such as a coat, dhoti, a neckerchief, a jacket, a turban in the cotton fields before it is sent into towns? When such is not the case, how could this multifarious world with its wonderful construction come into being without a maker? If you, through sheer prejudice, hold on to the belief that the universe came into being without the instrumentality of a higher power, you ought to prove to us by ocular demonstration what the above-mentioned articles, such as clothes, come into existence without the agency of man. When you can't do it, how can a sensible man, then, ever believe in your most unwarranted statements? Just a side note, a dhoti is a garment for the lower half of the body. Capital O. Is God Virakta, one who has renounced all pleasures, close parentheses, open the parentheses, close parentheses, or Mohita, open parentheses, one who is attached to worldly objects, close parentheses, ? If he be Virakta, why did he bother himself about creating this world? ? But if he be Mohita, he could never possess the power to create the world. Capital A. Neither Vairagya open parentheses, renunciation, close parentheses, nor moha, open parentheses, I believe that says infatuation, close parentheses, can be predicated of God, because he that is all-pervading can neither accept nor renounce anything. There is nothing higher than God, nor is there anything that is unattainable to him, hence he cannot be attached to anything. Renunciation and infatuation can be predicated of the soul, and not of God. Capital O. Should you hold that God created the world and gives souls the fruits of their deeds, he would be involved in the manifold affairs of this world and will consequently be afflicted with misery. Capital A. When a righteous and learned judge of this world, who discharges manifold duties and awards men just fruits of their deeds, does not get involved in his affairs nor is afflicted with misery, why should the great God possessed of infinite powers be involved in the affairs of this world and afflicted with misery? You, through your ignorance, seem to think that God is also like you or one of your Tirthankars. Now this is the result of your lack of knowledge. Should you desire to rid yourself of your ignorance and be like the evils, you should depend on the Veda. Should you desire to rid yourself of your ignorance and the like evils, you should depend on the Veda and other Shastras for guidance. Oh, why do you doubt and stumble? ? Now we shall show, on the authority of their open parentheses, scriptural, close parentheses, aphorisms, what the beliefs of the Jainis with regard to the universe are. We shall briefly give the meaning of their sutras, open parentheses, scriptural aphorisms, close parentheses, and then discuss them in order to show how far they are right and how far wrong. Quote, this world has no beginning nor an end, neither it was ever created nor will it ever perish. In other words, this world has never been created by anyone. Quote, end quote. In the above-mentioned discussion on theism and atheism, it has been stated, quote, "O idiot!" ! There is no creator of the world. It was never made, nor will it ever perish. End quote. Capital A. That which is the result of the combination, open parentheses, of different elements, close parentheses, can never be beginningless or endless. An effect must have a beginning as well as an end. All objects of this world are the result of the combination of their constituent elements and are subject to creation and dissolution. Why is not this world then subject to creation and dissolution? Had your Tirthankaras possessed correct knowledge, they would have not written such impossible things, open parentheses, in their books, close parentheses. You are as ignorant as the founders of your faith were. A man who believes what you Jainis say can never know the true nature of things. Why can't you believe that which is clearly the result of the combination of its constituent elements is the subject to creation and dissolution? ? It is clear then that the teachers or the founders of the Jain religion were not acquainted with the sciences of geography and astronomy, nor do the Jainis at the present moment possess any knowledge of these subjects. Otherwise, how could they have believed in and taught the undermentioned incredible things? Exclamation point. According to the Jainis, even the earth is the body of a soul. They also believe in such creatures whose bodies are made of water. No man could ever believe such things. Now here are a few examples of the false teachings of their Tirthankars, whom the Jainis believe to be possessed of correct knowledge and the state of Godhead. Time has been described in the Ratnasabhaga. Parentheses, the Jainis believe this book to be authoritative. It was printed and published at the Jain Prabhakar Press, Benares by Nanak Chand Jati on the 28th of April, 1879 AD. On page 145, thus, Samya is called Sakshamakala, smallest period of time.
And Sakhayata Samyas equals Avali 1670216. Avalis equals Maherta or Maherla. I'm not sure if this is Maherta or Maherla. I think his says Maherta. 30 Maherta equals 1 Divas, which is a day. 15 Divasas equals 1 Paksna, which is a fortnight. 2 Pakshas equals 1 Masa, a month, and 12 Masas equals 1 Arsha, a year.
And 7 million times 10 million plus 65,000 times 10 million Varshas equals 1 Puva. And Asankatya Pruvas equals 1 Palyomakala. Now, as to the exposition of the meaning of the word Asankayata, let a pit square in shape, each side of which is 4 kosas long and the same in depth, be dug. Let it be filled with pieces of the hairs of the body of
Jugli men in the following manner. The hair of a jugli of the man is 4,096 times finer than that of an ordinary man of our days. In other words, 4,096 hairs of a jugli man make 1 hair of an ordinary man. Now take the hair of a jugli man about 1 finger's breadth and length and divide it into 8 parts, and then repeat this process 7 times. You'll get altogether 2,097,152 pieces. Fill the above described pit with such pieces of hair, then get 1 piece of hair out of the pit in 100 years. When all the pieces of hair have been removed in this way, the pit is emptied. The time occupied by this process is still Sankyata, not Askenyata. When each of those pieces is again divided into
Askenyata pieces, and the pit is again filled with such pieces of hair, so compactly that even if the army of an emperor of the whole earth were to pass over the pit, it should not make any impressions on it. Then let each piece of hair be taken out once in 100 years. When that pit is thus emptied, the period covered by the whole process is called pruva. Such as Sakyata Pruvas makes 1 Palyamakals.
100,000 times 100 million Palyamakals equals 1 Saga Romapala. 1 Saga Ropamakala. 100,000 times 100 million Saga Ropawakalas equals 1 Utsarpani. 1 Utsarpani plus 1 Avarpani equals 1 Kala Karat Kala, or 1 cycle of time. Anatta Kala Chakras equals 1
Pujgala Pravrita. Anatta Kala is that which is beyond the calculation of time given in the Jain scriptures, and has been exemplified by 9 illustrations. Such Ananta Pujgula Pravitas have passed since the soul has been wandering about. Now will you, mathematicians, be able to calculate the time given in the Jain books, and will you be able to believe it to be correct? The Tirthankras of the Jainis have studied a novel kind of mathematics. Such are the teachers and followers of the Jain faith. Their ignorance is unfathomable. We give here a few more specimens of their dense ignorance. Excuse me. In the Ratnasara Bhaga on page 133 begins what is called the essence of the Jain scriptures written by their Tirthankaras from Rishabhadeva to Mahariva, who are 24 in number. On page 148 of the same book, it is written that the earth and stones, which are different forms of earth, should be regarded as Prithvikayu creatures. The bodies of such creatures are the minutest part of a finger breadth. In other words, they are very small. Their age is 22,000 years at most. There are countless souls in one plant. These are called ordinary plants, bulbous roots, etc., and Anatakaya are the souls of ordinary plants. Their ages Anatama hurt. But this Mahurt is the Jain Mahurta that has been described above. The simple plant is one which possesses only one sense of touch, i.e. of touch, and only one soul. The body of such a soul measures 4,000 yojanas in length, according to the believers in the Puranas. 1 yojana, 4 equals kosas. One yojana equals kosas. But according to the Jainis, 1 yojana equals 10,000 kosas. Its age is at the most 10,000 years. Now we come to the souls which possess a body with two senses, one body and the other mouth, such as a conch shell and a louse. Their physical bodies measure at the most 48 kosas in length, and their age at the most is 12 years. The writer has made a mistake here. A creature with such a big body should have a longer duration of life. Lice with bodies 48 kosas long will surely be found on the bodies of the Jainis alone, and they alone must have seen them. Other people could never be so lucky as they. Their scorpions, bugs, fleas, and flies have bodies 1 yojan long. Their age at the most is 6 months. We are sure no one besides the Jainis have ever seen a scorpion 8 miles long. Scorpions and flies 8 miles long are to be found according to the Jain faith alone. Such scorpions and flies must be surely found in the houses of Jainis alone, and they alone in the whole world must have seen them. Such one of such scorpions sting a Jaini, it is hard to imagine how he would suffer. The water creatures such as fish have bodies 1,000 yojanas, 1 yojana being equal to 10,000 kosas. The body of a water creature must be 10 million kosas long. Their age is 10 million pruva varshas, but none of the Jainis could ever have seen such big creatures. The bodies of quadrupeds, such as elephants, range between 2 and 9 kosas in length, and their age is 84,000 years, but no one but the Jainis could ever have seen them, and it is they alone who believe in their existence. No sensible man could believe in such things. The mammals that live in water have bodies 1,000 yojanas, or 10,000 kosas long, and their age is 100 million years. The founders of the Jain faith alone must have seen such animals with such huge bodies in their dreams. Now, are these not huge lies? These things are so utterly incredible. Now we have come to the measurements of the earth. On this crooked planet there are Ansakyatas lands and Asankyata oceans. By the term Ansakyata, it is here meant the period is covered by 2.5 saga pamkalas. On this earth, Jambudvipa is in the midst of all islands. Its area is 100,000 yojanas, or 1 billion square kosas. This land is surrounded on all sides by the salt sea. Its area is 200,000 yojans, or 2 billion square kosas. Next to it is the ocean called Kaladahis. Its area is 8 billion square kosas. Further back is Pushkarvarta Island. Its interior is divided into zones. One half of it is occupied by men. Further than this, there are countless oceans and islands in which crawling creatures live. In the Jambu Island, there are 6 continents. Honestly, I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna just go straight to A. Capital A. Geographer, please, have you made a mistake in taking the measurements of the Earth or the Jainis? ? Will you please correct the Jainis if it be their mistake, or correct yourselves if you have made a mistake? Anyhow, settle this little matter between yourselves. A little reflection will show that the writers of the Jain scriptures and their disciples were quite ignorant of geography, astronomy, and mathematics. Had they been conversant with these branches of knowledge, why would they have concocted such cock and bull stories? ? No wonder! ! Such people believe the universe to be uncreated and deny the existence of God. The Jainis do not let learned men of other faiths have their books to read, because the books they believe to have written by their reliable Tirthankars are full of such things as are opposed to the dictum of knowledge. They do not let other people see them, lest someone might expose their absurdities. No one besides the Jainis who possessed a grain of sense can ever believe in such yarns. They have introduced all these absurdities in order to prove that the world is beginningless, but it is altogether wrong. It is true though that the material cause of the world, called Prakriti, is beginningless, because those Pramadus, the minutest particles of matter, cannot be further divided by any means, are the basic principles and are uncreated, but they do not possess any power for ordered formation and disintegration. The Pramanus are simple entities. They are separate from each other. Let me find my place. Separate from each other. Cosmology. They are separate from each other and inert by nature. They cannot combine with each other in an ordered manner, hence it is imperative that there should be a conscious being to combine them, who should also be omniscient. It is the work of the beginningless, eternal, conscious supreme spirit to regulate the sun and the earth and other planets, the physical world, in which combination of different elements and a special designer to be seen can never be beginningless. Should you believe the effect to be beginningless, it would have no cause. In other words, it would be both an effect and its own cause, and therefore Atmasharya. But this can never be true, since a man cannot stand on his own 2 shoulders, nor can one become his own father or son. Hence the necessity of a maker of the universe is clearly demonstrated. Capital O. If God beheld the maker of the universe, who is his maker? ? Capital A. There can be no maker, first maker, the cause of the first cause. It is only because the first maker or the first cause exists that that the world, an effect comes into being. Without of which combination, with others, of separation, from them, cannot be practicated, and which is the cause of the first combination or disintegration, can never have another maker or cause. This subject has been fully discussed in the 8th chapter of this book. The reader is advised to consult the chapter for further information. How can the Jainis understand the abstruse science of cosmogony when they do not even properly understand simple and easy things? ? The belief of the Jainis with regard to the world being beginningless and endless, to formation in each substratum being also beginningless and endless, and to attributes of each substratum being also endless, which is recorded to the in the Prakaranatanakar is quite untenable because attributes and other characteristics that are finite must also have an end. Even if by the word endless you mean countless, you cannot be right. If it may be all right from the point of view of the soul, but cannot be true from that of God. The belief that because each object of the world is distinct from all other objects, it cannot be classified with any other objects, possesses the power of producing an effect of being transformed into its casual forms, and because there are an endless number of objects in the world, the number of forms will be infinite, and the power residing in objects will also be infinite, betrays the ignorance open parentheses of the Jainis, close parentheses. How could a Pramanu, an atom, also how can a Pramanu contain endless, unclassified formations when it has limits? In like manner, it is childish to believe that an object can possess endless formations in its attributes, because when a space has limits, how can its contents be endless? There are many other cock and bull stories told in the scriptures of Jainis. Now we shall set forth forward parentheses and discuss close parentheses the belief of the Jainis with regard to Jiva, the soul, and Ajiva, inert matter. In the Jindat Suri, it is written, what possesses consciousness is Jiva, and that which is devoid of it is Ajiva. Jiva is the soul, and Ajiva is dead inert matter. Good and righteous atoms constitute virtue, and evil atoms constitute vice. Capital A. The soul and inert matter have, of course, been rightly defined, but it is wrong to say that the inert atoms are righteous or vicious. For the power of doing right and wrong can only exist in a conscious entity. Mark! Exclamation point. All inert substances are capable of doing deeds good or bad. The doctrine of the immortality of the human spirit is sound, but it is foolish to believe that the human soul, whose capacities are limited, can, when emancipated, attain to a state of omniscience. For whatsoever is finite can never attain infinite power. The Jainis believe that the universe, the soul, the actions of the soul, and the concatenation of births, and deaths are eternally coexistent. Here, too, it seems that the Tirthankars of the Jainis have fallen into an error, for it is impossible that the created universe, i.e. the world which is the product of the combination of elements, close parentheses, the natural process called into being after creation, the actions of men, and metempsychosis should be eternal. If it be so, how can the Jainis believe consistently that the concatenation of existences and the necessity of doing deeds may come to an end? Whatever is eternal can have no end. If it be said that the eternal substances are subject to destruction, all eternal substances believed in by the Jainis will naturally be thought to be capable of existing only for a limited period. However, if the word eternal be taken to mean that which can never come to an end, it is impossible not to believe that human actions and metempsychosis will exist forever. This being the case, it is clear that salvation, being dependent on a particular cause, the temporary cessation of actions, will only last for a limited period and not forever. Moreover, on account of the relation between the doer and his actions being perpetual, actions will never cease to exist. This attains salvation forever, and that ordinary Jainis can also attain to that state. Capital O. If a rice grain be divested of its center covering or be brought in contact with fire, the seed cannot grow. Even so, a soul, once emancipated from physical bondage, can never again become subject to births and deaths. Capital A. The relation between the soul and the necessity of doing deeds does not resemble that which subsists between a rice grain and its outer covering. It is one of inseparable inherence. The soul is eternal from eternity action, and the soul's power of doing deeds are intimately related. If it be believed If it be believed that the human spirit is devoid of the power of doing deeds, it will naturally follow that all souls are inert like stones, and therefore incapable of enjoying the bliss which falls to share of emancipated spirits. If the soul is emancipated from the bondage of actions, the power of doing, which has inhered in the soul from eternity, it will surely, after attaining salvation, which, open parentheses, according to the Jain belief, close parentheses, is perpetual, again become subject to metempsychosis. For if it is possible that a soul, being freed from the necessity of doing deeds, which are the means of salvation, can attain to this state of final beatitude, it is equally possible for it to revert from perpetual salvage to bondage, open parentheses, of births and deaths, close parentheses. An effect which is due to the operation of certain causes can never be perpetual. If, however, you believe that salvation is attainable without the adoption of the means of attaining it, what then is the difficulty in believing that the souls, open parentheses, reversion of the state of, close parentheses, bondage is possible without its being under the necessity of doing deeds? A piece of cloth which has become dirty on account of contact with dirt is cleansed by washing and can again become dirty. Similarly, the soul is placed under the necessity of doing deeds when it has committed sins like this simulation and has been dominated by malice, etc. If you believe that the soul is purified by the attainment of true knowledge, by keeping good company and by righteous conduct, and is contaminated if the causes which go to contaminate it are in operation, you cannot escape the conclusion that souls in a state of emancipation can revert to the bondage, open parentheses, of births and deaths, close parentheses, and vice versa. And if adventitious circumstances can remove dirt, they can likewise bring on pollution. The sound belief, therefore, is that the soul has been subject to metempsychosis and emancipation since creation and is not so eternal. Capital O. The soul was never pure, it is always somewhat contaminated. Capital A. If it was never quite pure, it cannot ever be so. It is possible to remove by washing the dirt that may have soiled a sheet originally clean, but it is impossible to remove its naturally white color. The dirt can soil the sheet again, even if it has been washed. Even if it has been once washed. Similarly, the emancipated soul can be branded once again with the taint of sin. Capital O. It is foolish to believe in the existence of God, for a man can take on a new body as a result of deeds done in the past birth. Capital A. If it be in the power of the soul to take on a new body without divine instrumentality, it is inconceivable that it will, of its own free will, be reincarnated amidst happy environments. The plea that the soul is subject to the fruits of its deeds will not hold good, for even a thief does not go to jail voluntarily, nor does a open parentheses, a homicide, close parentheses, mount the gallows of his own free will. It is the king by whose authority these sentences are executed. You cannot therefore but believe that God exists in order to cause the soul to take on new bodily forms and to reward or punish it according to its good or evil deeds. Capital O. Even as drinking causes intoxication, open parentheses, without extrinsic aid, close parentheses, so does the soul receive the fruits of its deeds without the instrumentality of any other power. Capital A. This is absurd! Exclamation point. Inverterate drunkards do not feel the effects of intoxication as do those who are not addicted to the vice. If your contention be right, those that are sinners of the deepest dye should be punished less severely than those who are not given much to sinful practices. Capital O. Each man is punished according to his natural instincts. Capital A. If the punishment is due to natural instincts, it cannot be predicated of it that it has begun or ended. Open parentheses, for it must always endure, close parentheses. Open parentheses, it is therefore clear that the award of reward or punishment is not due to adventitious causes, close parentheses. Even as accidental causes soil the clean sheet and the removal restores to it its former purity. Capital O. Combination is essential to the production of a result, just as clarified butter cannot be produced unless milk and some acid thing. Excuse me. Just as clarified butter cannot be produced unless milk and some acid thing are combined. Why not then believe that, open parentheses, reward or punishment, close parentheses, the result of the union of the soul with an action, question mark. Capital A, milk and an acid thing are combined through the instrumentality of a third entity. There ought therefore be a third entity, God, to establish a relationship between the soul and the fruits of the deeds done by it. For inert substances can never of themselves combine methodically with, and the soul, being possessed of finite power, cannot of itself receive the fruits of its actions. This shows that without the operation of laws made by God, the system of rewards and punishments according to the deeds done by men cannot work. Capital O, whoever is freed from the necessity of doing deeds, open parentheses, attains salvation and, close parentheses, becomes God. Capital A, the power of doing actions being eternally inherent in the soul, the latter cannot be deprived of it. Capital O, the necessity of doing deeds is not beginningless. Capital A, If it is so, there must have been a time when the soul was incapable of doing deeds, and thus the capacity of doing actions was planted in an entity which did not possess it. Why cannot, then, emancipated souls be made to perform deeds? The relation between the doer and the deeds is of an inseparable character and can never cease. What we have written on this subject in the 9th chapter is therefore worthy of belief. The soul can never be equal to God, nor matter how extensive its knowledge and power are. These latter being necessarily limited. Of course, by force of psychic practices, the soul can secure the development of its knowledge to the greatest possible extent. The Arhats among the Jainis believe that, like the body, the soul also possesses the property of extension. This is absurd, for if it be so, the soul of a little insect cannot be contained in the body of an elephant, and vice versa. The soul is a fine entity. I believe that's the soul is a fine entity which can reside even in an atom. Its powers, however, are linked with nervoic and electric forces and the nerves, etc., and it is therefore kept informed of all that goes on in the body. If healthy influences act upon it, it becomes virtuous. If unhealthy influences operate, it becomes sinful. The following verses clearly set forth by Jain beliefs. Capital or 1. No capital. Following verses clearly set forth the Jain beliefs. 1. O man! Only by following the Dharma, pain caused by the concatenations of births and deaths and pursuits of mundane aims is destroyed, which has been expounded by a defied Jain saint, one who has subdued his passions. Do thou believe that only Jain preceptors are good teachers and real devas, Brahma, Harihar, and in fact all except the Jain saints, the first of whom was named Rishabhadeva, and the last Mahavir, are not worthy of adoration. Whoever worships them with the desire of securing his well-being is a dupe. End quote. The upshot of all this is that no good accrues if one does not follow the good Jain faith and its good saints, and follows the bad religion and so-called saints of others. Capital A. Learned men should mark how stupid the Jain scriptures are. The regeneration of people groveling in misery is only possible if they follow the system of conduct expounded by Jin, who is the God of gods, glorious, beatified saint, possessed of all knowledge, the expounder of scriptures, pure, free from the stain of vice, possessed of the qualities of mercy and clemency. The religion taught by Harihar is not such as can promote the well-being of the world. The four virtues expounded by the supreme saints are exalted. They are mercy, forgiveness, possession of correct knowledge, good company, and good conduct. Capital A. If mercy is not shown to all mankind, it is of no use. The same may be said of forgiveness. It is not good to remain ignorant while boasting of knowledge, to grope in the dark while talking of good company, and to mistake starvation, fasting, for good conduct. The following has been said in praise of the Jain religion. O man! Even if thou canst not perform austerities, reform thy conduct, read the aphorisms, meditate upon the teachings of the Prakaran Ratanarkar and other scriptures, and bestow charity upon the deserving. Do thou believe that the Arhat, the Jain saint, alone is the God, to whom and to other true preceptors worship is due from thee, and the Jain religion is the best. This is a beautiful belief which will be the cause of your regeneration. End quote. Capital A, or parentheses, capital A, close parentheses. Although mercy and forgiveness are good qualities, yet if they be prompted by unreasoning prejudice, mercy becomes equivalent to cruelty, and forgiveness becomes as bad as revenge. What we mean to say is that it is not possible to enforce the principle of not causing pain to any living creature on all occasions. Punishing the wicked is in fact an act of mercy. If a wicked person be exempted from punishment, thousands will suffer at his hands. This act of misplaced mercy will be as much fruitful of mischief as cruelty, and this act of forgiveness will prove as bad as revenge. It is quite true that mercy consists in endeavoring to promote the happiness of all sentient beings and to wean them from sorrow. It does not consist in merely drinking water filtered by means of a piece of cloth, or in saving the lives of tiny creatures. This species of mercy is only theoretically believed in by the Jainis. They do not show it in their practical conduct. It is not an act of true mercy to feed the needy without distinction or creed, and to reverence and serve the learned men professing a religion other than one's own. If the teachers of the Jain religion had the right conception of mercy, they would not have preached as follows. Quote, the Jains are strictly prohibited to 1. Praise a person belonging to another religion, or to talk of his good qualities. 2. To salute him. 3. To talk much to him. 4. To talk to him frequently. 5. To bestow upon him food and clothes. 6. To supply odoriferous substances and flowers to enable him to worship his idol. Close quote. Let the wise consider with what feelings of hatred, malice, and hostility the Jainis are actuated in their relations with those who Let the wise consider with what feelings of hatred, malice, and hostility the Jainis are actuated in their relations with those who profess a religion different from theirs. Those who show so little consideration for people who do not belong to their religion surely deserve to be called merciless. It is not an act of very great piety to serve the members of one's own family. The Jainis may be called members of one great household, fraternity, a person therefore who has absolutely no regard for others will not be called merciful by the wise. In the Vivikasar, it is written that the Jainis murdered Namuchi, the prime minister of the then king of Mathura, because they thought him their enemy, and the murderers were purified by the performance of penance. Was not this an act calculated to destroy all feelings of mercy and forgiveness? People whose malice against those who differ from them in religion is so great that they do not scruple to murder them should rather be termed actively hostile than merciful. The definitions of good company, etc., are given in Pragmananansar, which is a synopsis of the teachings of the Jain saints. Right faith, good company, knowledge, and good conduct, these four lead to salvation. Yogdeva has given an exposition of these duties, the possession of a firm and perfectly sincere faith in what the Jain scriptures teach about the soul and other entities, and a love for the Jain religion constitute true faith and good company. Quote, one must believe in those entities in which Jin believed and in no others. End quote. The wise call a full or a superficial knowledge of the entities believed in by Jain a knowledge of them as they really exist. Quote, correct knowledge, end quote. Good conduct is renouncing of all connection with other religions which deserve to be denounced. Again, there are 5 bratas or obligatory duties. 1. I believe this is Shashinsa, abstination from killing any sentient creature. Sanarita, sweet speech. Astiya, abstination from encroaching upon the rights of others. Brahmacharya, thorough control of the sexual impulses. Aparigara, renunciation. Most of these injunctions are sound, such as those relating to abstination from killing and to the giving up of theft and other evil practices. But the behests enjoining hatred and denunciation of other religions are likely to mar the wholesome effect of these sound teachings also. In the very first aphorism quoted above, it is laid down that the religions expounded by Harihar, etc., cannot help forward the regeneration of the world. The denunciation of religion, the study of which makes one learned in all sciences and virtuous, is surely a malicious act. People who extol to the heavens their Tirthankar saints who teach doctrines which are absolutely opposed to the laws of nature cannot be prompted by wrong-headedness and unreasoning prejudice. How absurd that a Jaini should be regarded a good man merely because he declares that the Jain religion is a true religion, even though he be not possessed of good conduct, of knowledge, and of habits of benevolence, while philanthropic and virtuous people who are non-Jaini should be regarded bad men merely because they do not profess a belief in the Jain religion. We wonder what to say about such people, except that they are possessed of a defective and childish understanding. The only conclusion that can be drawn from all this is that their teachers were not deeply learned men. They were, on the contrary, selfish. If they had not denounced all religions, nobody would have been seduced from the right path and led to believe their false teaching, and they would surely have been baffled in their object. Mark! Exclamation point. It can be proved that the Jain faith is calculated to ruin people morally and spiritually, and the Vedic religion tends to the redemption of the world, and that Harihar, etc., were the true devas, while Rishabhadeva, etc., were the false devas. How would the Jainis like being told this by other people? We should now expose further the errors of the Jain teachers. Quote, whoever disobeys the behests of the Jain saints by deviating from the path carved out by them and thus falls into moral turpitude commits a sin and is involved in misery. It is very difficult to follow duties like laid down by the Lord of Jain Tirthankaras. Therefore, it is best to always act in such a way that his behest may not be violated. End quote. It is foolish to indulge in self-praise, to extol one's own religion, and to denounce other religions. That alone is worthy of praise, which is praised by learned men belonging to another faith. Even thieves praise themselves. Does this prove that thievishness is worthy of praise? ? Again, the Jain teachers teach, quote, just as a ruby which is embedded in the head of a venomous snake should not be sought after, even so it behooves the Jainis to shun the company of a non-Jaini, no matter how virtuous or learned he is, quote, unquote, end quote. How erroneous is this teaching, ? If the Jain teachers and their disciples had been learned men, they would have, try to inoculate, a love for the learned. When even their Tirthankars were ignorant, how could they be expected to reverence the learned? ? Who would not like to take hold of gold, even if it be lying in filth or dust? It is clear, therefore, that no sectarians are so much biased, perverse, wrong-headed, and ignorant as the Jains are. Again, the Jain scripture says, quote, let not the Jains even look at those that are opposed to the Jain religion, end quote. How stupid this injunction is, the wise can find out for themselves. There is no doubt about it that he who preaches the true religion stands in dread of There is no doubt about it that he who preaches the true religion stands in no dread of anybody. The Jain teachers knew very well that their teachings were absurd and could not stand the test of discussion, and therefore thought it best to denounce all and thus to ensnare fools in their net. End quote. Again, it is taught in the Jain books, quote, all religions that are opposed to the Jain faith lead mankind to sin. It is therefore best to shun all other faiths and to believe in the Jain religion only. End quote. This shows that the Jain religion teaches its followers to hate, denounce, and regard with malice all that does not belong to it. It thus makes people wicked. No sectarians are so unreasonable and violent in their hatred of others as are the Jainis. It is the wicked only who denounce all indiscriminately and praise themselves in hyperbolic terms. Discerning men, no matter to what religion they belong, praise the good points in a religion and express disapproval of the weak points therein. Here, in another specimen of Jain teachings, quote, the other faiths and their teachers dwindle into insignificance when compared with the Jain faith. The teachings of the omniscient jinns and the teachers of the Jainis. It means that the Jain teachers are the true devas and the Jain religion is the true religion, while the teachers of other religions are the false devas and their teachings are false. End quote. It seems that the Jainis are like the market women that sell plums, who always trumpet forth that their plums are sweet, even though they be sour, and invariably run down the plums sold by others. The Jain religion teaches that it is a sin for the Jainis to serve people protesting other creeds. We have already stated that, according to the Jainis, it is best to shun even the good and virtuous among the non-Jainis, even as it is advisable not to seek the ruby embedded in the head of a snake, but the Jainis have gone a step further in their denunciation of other religions. They say, quote, all except the Jain teachers are false teachers and are worse than snakes. It is therefore not right to see them, to serve or to associate with them, because snake bite kills a man once only, but by associating with false teachers belonging to non-Jain religions, one becomes subject to a concatenation of births and deaths. O good man, ! Do thou never stand by the side of a non-Jain teacher, because thou wilt court misery if thou served him even a little. End quote. Who can possibly be hard-hearted, mistaken, hostile in a greater degree than are the Jainis? Perhaps the Jain teacher think that if they will not denounce others and praise themselves, no one will serve and respect them, but in reality they are very unfortunate, for so long as they do not associate with and serve good and learned men, they will never obtain true knowledge and attain to the right conception of duty. It is therefore It therefore behooves the Jainis to give up their false beliefs and to accept the truth taught by the Veda. And this consists their real well-being. Again, the Jain saints teach, quote, one must always shun company of him who is past all reform, refractory, and skillful in doing evil deeds. Such a person is sure to compass the ruin of his benefactor. The man who seeks to do good to a false teacher, belonging to another religion, seeks his own ruin, even as a person who, prompted by compassion, undertakes to remove the bandage from the eyes of a blindfolded lion, is eaten up by the animal. It is therefore safest to keep away from the false teacher, end quote. If the Jainis were regarded by others with the same amount of hostility with which they are taught to regard all non-Jainis, their lot would become intolerable. If nobody were to do them a good turn, they would grovel in misery, and much of their work would remain undone. Why do not the Jainis do unto others as they would be done by? Again, the Jain books teach. What a wonder that the more respect and reverence preachers whose very sight is abhorrent, who are so wicked that they can be purified only by penance, who are deserving of punishment, and vicious who keep with them with a view of dupe others. 3 staves, which are the symbols of the 4th order, who are sannyasis or brahmans, the more the true knowledge possessed by the Jain saints that are possessed of discernment is manifested, end quote. Mark exclamation point. How can it be possible for anybody to be possessed of vindictiveness, hostility, and unreasoning prejudice against others in a greater degree than are the Jainis? Other sectarians have also these weaknesses, but not to the extent to which the Jains have them. Vindictiveness is at the root of all sins. What wonder then if some Jainis are wicked! Exclamation point. And sum it up, and then move on to something else, and then end this broadcast. Okay. Again, the Jain teachers say, quote, people belonging to the non-Jain sects, which are composed of thieves, do not shun, open parentheses, moral, close parentheses, deterioration, even as ignorant people who mix themselves with thieves shake off all fear of their noses being lopped off. Open parentheses, by way of punishment, close parentheses, end quote. A man's own inner self is often reflected in his judgment about others. Can it ever be true that the Jain sect alone consists of honest men while all other sects are composed of thieves? It is only ignorant person and those whose intellect has been perverted on account of association with the wicked that are hostile and vindictive in the treatment of others. There is no religion which enjoys so much hostility towards people belonging to other faiths as does the Jain faith. Alright, I'm going to stop here. I wanted to also expunge on a little bit more about the enlightenment, or just at least the knowledge, the level of knowledge that is of the Andromedians. And I know I'm certain I've mentioned this before, but I honestly have not been with, well, I probably have. Well, I mean, anyway, the being for certain who's been with Andromedians, who's been on their biosphere, their ships, their spaceships, spacecraft, is Alex Hollier, and he gives a great, I really recommend that all beings learn about Andromedans, just to, not only just to be aware of it and to gain knowledge, but to know about their culture and to be aware of that culture, just as we are aware of other cultures, and we, in a sense, imbibe the good qualities of other cultures that are, interesting, likely to be attractive and, compelling and seem to be virtuous. Same thing with the Andromedans, because the Andromedans, of course, just a little bit about their lifestyle from what I know, just off the top of my head, no pun intended, is the fact of the matter that they remember their previous births when they're reborn, and death is a choice, if I'm phrasing that properly. They are incredible teachers. They're incredibly intelligent. They're they have knowledge in every aspect of everything. I mean, whatever they want to learn, whatever they want to study, they can study. They would know. Whether they're really really in tune with nature, plants, animals, and it's something that's in a sense very very part of the culture. They're telepathic. They're very very wise, and learning and teaching and studying is incredibly necessary, and they have the ability to study whatever they want to learn, whatever they want to know. They have access to it, whatever they want to learn. They also have the ability to study other planets, without interfering with that actual planet in a sense. So like they can't mess with time, but they can visualize it in a sense, like on this like this type of screen. Alex Collier describes it very well. And I would definitely suggest everybody learn about the Andromedans' ability to view that way. Also, Andromedans travel from place to place, and they're massive ships that are huge, and they're massive spheres. Some of them the size of Jupiter, Saturn, the size of planets. The size of planets, basically. They have mile-long parks in them, and you can read about it. Andromedans, Alex Kohler gives very great descriptions, and it's very, very, they're very peaceful, of course. They're very intelligent, and they're very advanced, and I think that's, of course, as I've said many, 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 many times before, very, very beautiful culture to understand, to learn, and be in tune with. So that was my summary, which is incredibly quick compared to the previous. Anyway, combining those together in a sense, like combining that gap in a sense allows hopefully a lot of clarity to be provided in what I just described, all the way from that description all the way to Andromeda's and the Andromeda Council. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Christopher Mark Curtis Bowen. I will probably do another edition later at another time, another date. Love you all. Good evening.